when I realized what my weapons were capable of in the wrong hands, I shut it down, stopped manufacturing.
Tony, you chose to do that. If we sign this, we surrender our right to choose. What if there's somewhere we need to go and they don't let us? We may not be perfect, but the safest hands are still our own.
If we don't.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes, and recently I had a conversation with Joe Corallo on the channel. We kind of talked about Wonder Woman, why an A-list character like that wasn't being treated probably like her character status and history, kind of would dictate. And today we're going to go over to the Marvel universe. We're going to talk about another character. Now, Iron Man certainly throughout history is not an A-list character as a solo title. He's a B or C-list character. He's a mainstay. Obviously, he's a more prominent character when he's a member of the Avengers. But Iron Man, people kind of seem to make the exact same mistakes over and over and over with the character. Mm-hmm. He seems to be the biggest villain in his own comic book, which I think could be interesting, but I don't think it's executed very well. Obviously, here to talk with me about that is independent comic writer, independent comic editor, award-winning editor, Joe Corallo. How you doing?
I'm all right, Wes. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. I've enjoyed these conversations, kind of dig into the characters now.
Yeah,
it's hard to know where to start with Iron Man and where it kind of all went wrong. I would kind of tend to think it's Marvel Civil War, where he was clearly the villain with the Superhero Registration Act. He was creating concentration camps for unregistered superheroes, and they were sticking them in the negative zone. And I think he created a clone of Thor to kill Goliath. Like, there's a lot of bad stuff in that. But when you think about it, like, he created the Extremist app. It gave it to everybody for free, only to turn around and try and sell it to them for like $100 a day. I think he gave Daredevil brain damage in that book. Like, he's done some really evil stuff when he was with the Illuminati. Obviously, they were destroying planets. It was his idea to ship Hulk off planet. So he's done a lot of crazy stuff. But when you think about like the essence of the character, and I think what Stan Lee likely intended with the character, I think when he created Tony Stark Iron Man, he was supposed to be more of an anti-hero as far as the superhero lineup, a superhero with real flaws. Who's the real hero? Is it Tony Stark or is it the Iron Man suit? Obviously that's like a big, conflict within the character. Mm-hmm. Will his hubris get the best of him? That seems like a storyline that we've seen over and over, but it makes sense for the character. When is he going to go too far with his technology, and it kind of turns on him, things like that. But he never stops. That's the problem. When he's trying to improve himself, it seems like he always turns himself into some type of AI or robot now.
Yeah, I mean, this is a character who, Stan had originally created with Don Heck, Jack Kirby, and his brother Larry Lieber to kind of be like, let me take like the most unlikable kind of person and force everyone to like him. So when Stan was creating this character, the idea of this like wealthy guy who made his money through like defense contracts, Stan was approaching that as, this is an unlikable person. You should not like this character, but I'm going to make you like this character because I'm going to show you these, heroic sort of elements. And you get kind of like the corny stuff where it's like, his heart is broken, literally, that kind of stuff in the comic. It's very Cold War heavy kind of stuff. And then over time, it wasn't really till like David Michelinie and Bob Layton that we started to develop these sort of things like, the storyline with Demon in a Bottle, with the alcoholism, although before that, even you had Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. kind of like betray Tony, and, the government was trying to like force Tony to register himself, something that Marvel would never go back to, registration for superheroes. But, so you'd have that. And then when Dave Michelinie and Bob Layton came back, you had Stark Wars, Armor Wars, and that's like the other story that's like driven into the ground that there's countless sequels for, that everyone wants to do. Although David and Bob were the ones who executed the story, it was actually Jim Shooter's idea to do Stark Wars, where Jim Shooter over dinner explained to them, like, well, basically David and Bob were upset with Marvel for not promoting their book more. It was like, we don't get house ads, we don't get anything. Like, what do we got to do? We're putting out a really good book. And Jim more or less told them, you know, high quality is like the bare minimum here. You need to do something more to get us to promote your book. Do an event, do something we can talk about within the title. And then they were like trying to think of something, and then Jim told them what it was going to be. He was like, here's what you do this, and we'll promote your book. And that's sort of how Armor Wars came out. Which, I mean, was also a way for Jim to be like, there's way too many of these like armored characters, you know, with, you know, Stiltman and Whirlwind and so many other characters. So it was like, let's also use this as a way to like kill off or remove the armor of some of these characters, tighten the line a little bit, you know, which always lasts for a short amount of time until they bloat it more than it ever was before, which is comics.
Now that you're missing those characters, you have to replace them with new mechanical characters. But then you need to get some nostalgia back. So you have to reintroduce all the characters you killed off. So you end up having twice as many armor-powered characters as you had to begin with.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a tale as old as time in comics.
Absolutely. And then, you know, we've just seen more Armor Wars. They even sell trades and things like that with like, you know, Armor War, you know, prelude to Armor Wars and things like that, just to move those, because those are the ones they really lean into. You know, it's kind of a shame because there's a lot of really good stuff from Denny O'Neil's run. You know, I think Herb Trimpe and Rich Buckler did a bunch of that. You know, it's been ever since like Heroes Reborn. It's been the constant reset over and over and over again. You know, like you were saying with Extremis, I like that story, but whenever you get Warren Ellis on something, he's there for like 5-6 issues and he's gone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's like his Marvel trajectory has always just been like, oh, I'll reboot Thor for you with like World Engine, and I'm gone. I'll reboot, you know, Iron Man with Extremis, and I'm pretty sure it was billed like he was the guy taking over Iron Man, and I was like, and
classic Marvel bait and switch.
You know, I think one of the last times, you know, Iron Man got a lot of buzz was around Matt Fraction's run, because it timed just when like Matt Fraction was really blowing up. I personally enjoyed it in the beginning. It wasn't until it just became like a Dark Reign tie-in that it was kind of like, I'm not that
the biggest Matt Fraction fan. I think he can come in and tell some exciting stories to begin with. But over time, he's always going to start deconstructing the character and really start altering things like fundamental core values of the character. So where, you know, if he's on there long enough, you won't recognize the character when he's done. That's always been my kind of complaint about Fraction and superheroes.
Sure, you know, it was like, it's interesting enough, but then it was like even his first arc, while I did enjoy it, it was a lot of like, you know, it's Obadiah Stane and Justin Hammer's like daughters running things now. It was like Justine Hammer and I forget, Obadiah Stane's son. That's right. I guess that's interesting, but at the same time, it's like, how is time working? Like, is Tony really old now? Like you know, like whenever you start doing these sort of things where you're introducing like these legacy characters, take out these older characters, but the older character still looks the same as he did, you know, in the 60s. It's like, yeah, it turns into.
I know it works for Iron Man because they always do like the reverse Pinocchio. He doesn't want to be a real boy, so he's always reverse engineering himself back to a robot. So you never know if he's even human anymore in any of the comics anymore.
Yeah,
for years.
Yeah, so much of that is like you said, it's like after Civil War, they got a few ideas in their head that they just no one can let go of. Everyone wants to do their version of AI Tony. Everyone wants to do their version of, you know, like, oh, Tony's brother, you know, Arno, and what's that? And it's like, I don't know anyone who cares about Arno Stark, but we still keep getting.
The only people I know that care about that are the people that are furious they went back and changed Tony Stark's origin to where he was adopted.
Sure. Yeah. No, absolutely. And again, that just seems like, why? Why are you fiddling with this sort of stuff? It's a lot of looking back and not looking forward, which I think was also, you know, it touches on some of the stuff when we were talking about Wonder Woman. Everyone's going back to, let's tell Wonder Woman's origin story again. Let's do another fight with Cheetah. Same thing kind of here. Like, let's tweak Tony's origin. Let's go back to Demon in a Bottle. Let's go back to Armor Wars over and over again.
You know, what's interesting about the characters, obviously they have the blueprint for a successful Tony Stark.
Sure.
You know, being integrated into the Avengers. He can be a cocky kind of a-hole. but he can still be a true blue hero while he's doing it. He can still have his problems with hubris. He can still have his problems with alcoholism and everything. But you can, as long as he's a dynamic personality who understands his own weaknesses, accept that, but still knows that he is the smartest man in the world and he is a hero. Like, that is who Tony Stark is. Obviously, that's what we've got in the MCU. Blew up. Was one of the most popular heroic characters in entertainment history. But they have not been able to create it, deconstruct that, and put it back together in comic book form. Obviously, I think when the Avengers was really starting to blow up, Tony Stark was in limbo or something.
Yeah.
It always seems like it's probably bad timing, but it's also the creative talent. It's Matt Fraction, Kieran Gillen, Dan Slott. Is like, you got to get somebody like with a cool new idea that isn't so far out there that you can get the character back to basics, but move him forward. They never can do that.
With some of these characters, there needs to be more room for people to hit the pause button, not put out an Iron Man comic for a while. It's like there seems to be this pressure, and this is the same thing with Wonder Woman and a lot of these other characters. Aquaman, like when you look at Iron Man, it's like, instead of feeling that pressure to like, we got to have an Iron Man comic every month, just next time you end and cancel the book, let it breathe a little bit. Develop a good pitch, develop a good story with a good creative team, then go for it. But instead, it's that, putting down the train tracks in front of an ongoing train. You're not allowing the time for creators to come up with a good story, to tell a good story.
Or maybe the right creator is not available at the time when Tony Stark Iron Man is ready to relaunch. Maybe you just need to hit the pause button. He's still going to be the Avengers until you're ready to go and really move forward with the right creator on the book. And I think that's what it is. It's a steady set of misses as far as the creative control, and they're just end up rehashing the same stories over and over. How many times have we gotten Iron Man 2020? Is it 2 or 3 times now, right?
Yeah.
I think it's 3 times that we've gotten it. And that wasn't an enormous miss. It was pretty embarrassing for Marvel. And we also, out of that, we got that episode on Marvel 616 on Disney Plus, which embarrassed the entire company because Dan Slott didn't have any ideas. That was one of the worst endings I've ever seen in any comic story, let alone an event in my life.
Sure. And when I was also pulling some numbers, because I just wanted to see how Iron Man was selling like over the years, just for my own interest while I knew we were going to talk about this, I noticed very often Wonder Woman usually outsells Iron Man. As much as we were talking about how can we make Wonder Woman sell, Iron Man has like less of an excuse. Iron Man is, for over a decade, was basically considered the MCU's like standard bearer, along with Chris Evans, as like the two guys who are really like, the helms of a multi-billion-dollar movie franchise. Yet for most of that time, Iron Man sales were pretty low. It was outselling Spider-Man briefly, I think, around when Iron Man 2 came out. But like, other than that, it's really been pretty low. And again, it really makes you think, like, how the name rec for Iron Man's through the roof in the past decade. How are these books not moving? And then how is it that so many of these books don't come anywhere close to reflecting the kind of stories or character we see in the... If you're a big fan of like Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man, you try to pick up a comic, he's an artificial intelligence, who has a brother and he was adopted. It's like, what the hell is this?
Just in the Tony Stark Iron Man relaunch, it was like, oh, this is an Iron Man family book. It's Iron Man and some AIs and some robots, like all on a team together. I was like, who wants to read an Iron Man team book? You go to Avengers for that. You come over to Iron Man, so you can go see him, go out in his armor and, beat some other tech, villains up, or, maybe learn a lesson about morality along the way. And sometimes he goes too far. It always does seem like the biggest... Iron Man's got some good villains, by the way. The Mandarin, you think about Justin Hammer, Doctor Doom, I would consider even, maybe not a primarily an Iron Man villain, but he certainly plays in that realm. But like, Iron Man's the biggest villain in his own comic. Like, it just
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, Madame Mask, she's fun. Obadiah Stane. There's a lot of interesting, Whiplash, Whirlwind. There's a lot of interesting sort of villains you can play with. I also really did enjoy the was it the Doom Quest Iron Man story where he fights Doctor Doom and. I had this, what was it? Jim Salicrup sketched that Iron Man and Dr. Doom at the bottom there for me. And that's, David Michelini and Bob Layton signed that too. But
beautiful.
that was fun. It's a fun little story. If you haven't, issues 149, 150, and 249, 250 is Iron Man, Dr. Doom, fighting each other in the past and in the future with Arthurian legend. Like Doctor Doom is like aligning himself with Morgana, of course, and like that's a quick little afternoon read. That's a good time. It's different. So like if you like Iron Man and you want something that's just not Demon in a Bottle and Armor Wars over and over again, that's a fun one.
What's interesting about Iron Man is, when you look back to like the old character designs and everything, it feels like with the way that technology and the print quality and the coloring quality that as it's evolved, like it should be a much more exciting comic book. His armor looks better now. It's more shiny. It's more pristine. You can do cooler things as far as his heads up display and all that kind of stuff. So you should be getting all these extra bells and whistles to go along with the solid Iron Man story, but they've missed a mark so many times. And, and Christopher Cantwell on the series now, I had high hopes. I was like, Kafu on the art is going to be fun.
Yep.
He's done Exo Manowar, a similar kind of character. Conan the Barbarian in an Iron Man suit. The first issue is fine. Then you get in the second one, and it's everybody in the world hates Iron Man. He can't do anything right. And it's just Hellcat telling him what a pathetic loser he was. Then the third issue, she's telling him how privileged he is, even though he just, almost killed himself and, probably should have his arm amputated. This is not why you come to an Iron Man comic.
No, and I mean, the first issue that they already established, is privilege in that, like, newsroom interview. Mm-hmm. It's like, that was enough. I think, like, the audience gets it. We don't have to hammer that point home too much more than that. You establish that in the first issue. It's like, okay, cool. He's going to be grappling with this privilege. We don't need to constantly bring it up because we know that's what he's grappling with. And and Hellcat seemed like an odd choice. It seemed like a character that they were like, let's throw darts at a wall with a bunch of characters, see where it lands. Hellcat, sure. Let's
let her check him. An idea of a back to basics Iron Man where he goes to a more original suit, because that is one of the problems with the character is he's all about technological evolution. The more you evolve, the faster it kind of comes along. So eventually his Iron Man suit is going to get too complicated. He is going to become an Iron Man. And you kind of got to bring him back. And then that's exciting. Let's go see him do some adventure stories.
Yeah,
it just never happened.
No, for sure. And also, fun fact, it was Steve Ditko who designed the red, like that red gold Iron Man costume that everyone, like that's what everyone thinks of when you think of Iron Man. So even though he wasn't involved really in Iron Man other than that, it's a cool little thing. It's like, oh, it makes sense. The guy did a great job with the Spider-Man costume, and he kind of changed Jack Kirby's robot monster kind of look into
a little
that,
slicker.
So something a lot sleeker, and can't beat that. But yeah, it's still using a lot of these older designs with very little updates. And this latest incarnation of Iron Man also seems like a lot of more of the same. It's just Hellcat's here this time for whatever reason.
Feels like every time they're going to reboot it, it's exciting. Finally, Tony Stark's coming back, and you're just disappointed. Obviously, we had the Brian Michael Bendis, essentially killed him off in theory and put Riri Williams in the armor. It wasn't the first time we've seen anyone else in the armor. Iron Man faked his own death in the past, and Rhodey was in the armor. These things happen, but when he finally comes back, do you see a successful Iron Man comic moving forward? Obviously, Iron Man's not in the MCU anymore. He's kind of not really in the public consciousness. Obviously, we are getting Chris Evans back. Maybe we'll get Tony Stark.
Yeah, you might. Maybe at least for voice work. Maybe he'll be the new Jarvis or something. We'll see.
Yeah, that would be a terrific Easter egg, but it feels like they kind of missed their window to make this maybe not an A-list character on the level of Spider-Man, but maybe right below Wolverine, maybe right up there with above Captain America. But it's not easy. He's sitting down there with Spider-Woman.
I think there's a lot you can still do with Iron Man. I think there's still interesting sort of tales you can tell. I don't think we're going to get it this run. Maybe next time.
Maybe next time.
I think the ship's kind of sailed on this run. It's not going in a direction that I think is going to captivate people, which is a shame. Maybe they can right the ship. I don't see it happening unless there's a new team on the book. It's okay to not go back to number one too. I can try a book again if it's a new team without it being reset to number one. I'm not that stupid. It's okay.
So there for a while, I was kind of excited with the idea of Scott Snyder. Obviously there's big changes going over. Man, what if Scott Snyder came over and worked with Iron Man? He would do like the craziest, biggest stuff ever.
Yeah, for sure. He did that Iron Man noir story, so that was like an Elseworld kind of thing. I got that signed by him a while back, but it's it was like Madame Mask, I think, was the villain for most of it. I haven't read it in forever. But yeah, I mean, Iron Man Noir was fine. Like, I think with all of the writing experience he's gotten under his belt and having been involved even a little bit with Iron Man, that like Scott would be an excellent choice to completely revamp a character like Tony Stark.
Yeah, give him that big epic story that it feels like it's. I guess Iron Man 2020 was supposed to be. The other writer that I think would do really great, Marvel would never do it because he doesn't have a high enough profile, but I guarantee you he'd knock it out of the park, is like Matt Kindt.
Yeah.
The stuff that he did with Exo Manowar, well, I don't think it's quite as good as Robert Venditti, but he did a lot of really cool character exploration, but at the same time, the character's doing really cool heroic stuff and failing here and there, and you want somebody like that to kind of embrace Tony Stark.
No, I like Matt Kindt a lot. I think there's a lot of people. Also still in, the DC stable that if they ended up moving over, could do a lot of stuff with Tony. I hope it happens. I hope they it really needs to be like de-Marveled a bit. Marvel has this sort of like in-house kind of brand lately that, it seems to just like be affecting all the books. It's like, I want this book to feel less Marvel, because it's just not working out the way Marvel does their books right now. There's something going on where these stories keep getting like more ridiculous, but the stakes don't feel real. And it's like, we need someone to come in, ground Tony, do a stripped down sort of more back to basics kind of thing, while still having high stakes. And you can do that. We have decades and decades of comics that have done that incredibly well. It doesn't need to be an alien invasion. It could be something a lot simpler than that. And Tony has to deal with real threats to, who he is, whether it's, his company, his wealth, his health, his ability to move on. It's like there's these different things you can do.
Let him be a playboy again.
Sure.
He feels so meek now. Like, he's subservient to the other characters in his own book.
Mm-hmm.
He's supposed to be, an extremely arrogant, self-impressed man. Let him be that again. Like, embrace the character.
Sure. There's something interesting to do with that. You can do that, and you have other characters interacting with him in a way, where you'd have like Rhodey kind of being like, well, shouldn't you be focusing a bit more on your work, boss? And things like that. You can kind of like, that's part of why the character just needs to be completely stripped down and brought back to basics, because they've gone too far into these weird directions where he's trying to grapple with a bunch of things that kind of like contradict each other, where it's like, on the one hand, it's like, okay, you're dealing with your privilege in a way, and I get that, but you're also dealing with like, but you're also like skirting your responsibility to employees and your workers by like abandoning your company, and then you're also like not real, and we're
He's not
also
human anymore. He was.
yeah.
They grew his body using his own DNA, and then they implanted his mind, which I think Friday had gone out and like collected and was storing it for him. It's like, this has gotten too stupid and silly even for comics. Like,
Yeah. So it's like, does he even have a moral code or moral standing? Does he have to obey the same rules that we all do from a moral
there's
perspective when
been
he's
an
not a person?
amazing story about that called The Watchmen, talking about Dr. Manhattan. Am I human anymore? Why should I even care about this? Another great exploration by the great Alan Moore in Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
You can take things like this and really do something for like 2 or 3 years with the character that's never been done before. But they just did it to recycle him back as a new meat product.
Yeah. Or even something more like like a back to basics kind of like Hush kind of thing with like Batman, where it's like a year of just fighting through his rogues gallery. Just fun comics where he's just
great villain, go in there, blow all of his stuff up, but he's got one armor left in a cave no one knew about. It's his original armor. He's going back to basics. He's got to rebuild himself. Boom.
Yeah.
Leave him some of his money so he can work on it.
Yeah, I think the frustrating thing here that a lot of fans have, and it's not just with Iron Man, it's with a lot of stuff, is that a lot of this stuff sounds and seems simple. Yeah. Because we're on the outside looking in, and then you see the people working in it. Sometimes they get so caught up in their own bubble and their own ideas, and they just get so insane and ludicrous, and there's so many other people putting in other ideas, and you get these like jumbled messes. And it's frustrating because everyone on the outside is just like, can't Iron Man just punch Whirlwind or something? Like, come on.
Well, and also Marvel, stop lying to your readers. When Tony Stark Iron Man was relaunched, you said Tony Stark was coming back to the Iron Man uniform. Turned out that wasn't Tony Stark. He wasn't alive anymore. Stop lying. It wasn't that cool of a reveal, and it was just annoying when you found out that you've basically been duped again.
Yeah,
that's a Marvel problem.
Yeah, but again, there's still hope. Maybe they'll eventually have to do a crisis and wipe the slate clean because
Heroes Reborn.
Yeah. Why not? At this point, why not just
Heroes disassembled? We can bring Bendis back. He's no longer exclusive over at DC again, I think.
There you go. Bring back Bendis. Bring back whoever. I mean, why not? There's so many people. Or Scott. If Scott's not exclusive anymore, but have Scott Snyder write Iron Man. I will 100% buy and be all in on a Scott Snyder Iron Man.
Absolutely. So, is there anything else you want to say about Iron Man and kind of just the state of the character and what we've kind of seen him over and over the years, or if you had enough?
Yeah, I mean, all I have to say is, I'm burned out in the direction it's going. I still always try to give Iron Man a shot whenever they relaunch it, but go back if you're interested in the Iron Man character and you want to read solo stuff. You go back to the David Michelinie and the Denny O'Neil stuff if you want some, solid, interesting Iron Man stories. He's not quite Robert Downey Jr. because Robert Downey Jr. kind of did his own thing. Yeah, he wasn't really like the Tony Stark character we know. So it might be a bit of a jarring experience at first, but some of those old Iron Man stories are fantastic from the late 70s through the 80s. And if you haven't checked them out yet, give it a shot, especially like something like Dune Quest, like I suggested. That's a fun one. Give it a shot.
Yeah, it could hold you over until the next reboot, and maybe they'll get the character right at that time.
Yeah, who knows?